All right, welcome back to Thrive, the show where we share the strategies, the steps, and give you the confidence you need to turn uncertainty to your greatest competitive advantage. And boy, have we got a story for you today. You are going to leave here not only motivated that you can overcome any adversity or obstacle that you've got, but with a brand new idea on how to approach sales to be even more confident and really drive performance. Now, my guest today, I tell you, he was brand new to me, but when I went on and did a little bit of research, boy, is Luke Lunkenheimer one impressive individual. He is not only incredibly successful in business and in sales, but he's got an incredible background of some adversity that he has overcome. So welcome to the show, Luke.
Well, thank you so much, Meridith. I appreciate being here.
Well, for those in the audience who don't know you, give us a little bit of, I want you to start with what you do now and then back into your story.
Sure. So what I do now is I train salespeople. I have a company called Paid to Persuade. And what we like to call it is a morally sound, ethical, and authentic approach to selling, which I think is very important in today's day and age, which at surface value sounds a little righteous, a little holier than thou. Those of us who are in the marketplace and in sales know it can be a vicious game, but there's a right way to do it and still have an edge. And that's what we try to teach. So that's what I'm doing on a day to day, but there's certainly a lot more depth to the story, as you know.
Yeah. So back us up. Tell us, I know we were talking back in the green room that you're coming to me today from just outside of Syracuse, New York. Are you from New York? Is that where you grew up? Take us back on the Luke journey, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I'm native of sunny central New York here, where it's a balmy 32 degrees and snowing. So, this is home to me. Meridith, I'm probably a very good example of the typical big frog, small pond, high school jock that got a scholarship. I really was. So I was the captain of the football team, dated the captain of the cheerleading squad, 87 kids in the graduating class. All the football players worked on the local farms to earn their stripes to play football. And, it's like there's a movie called Varsity Blues that MTV produced back in the early 2000s. That's a good representation of Cato, New York, minus the South Texas accent. So, it was a kind of a, for me to enter the marketplace was a big slap in the face because my family was a very small, very tight-knit family. And we didn't really, we didn't talk about things like business ownership and entrepreneurship. So all the things that you talk about on your podcast and on a lot of the shows that I appear on, it's funny that I end up in this ecosystem because if you would have looked, I tell people, if you would have looked at a kind of a film of my life, you would understand why it went the way it did. And you would have a hard time figuring out how I arrived here. But the tale goes, high school football player, probably Division II, mild Division I skill level, gets scholarship to play Division II ball, gets all of his college paid for, which was very important to me because I had the kind of parents that said, if you want to go to school, if you want to do something other than working a 9 to 5, you're going to have to figure it out on your own. We don't have the means. We don't have the credit. We don't have, anything that can help facilitate your growth. You're going to have to, if you want to do anything outside the normal shell of getting a job at the grocery store or the gas station, that's going to have to be on you. So I got my grades up and I played football. I worked very hard and I got a scholarship. Well, unfortunately, even though it was an academic scholarship, it was heavily reliant on the fact that I was a good football player. And, a couple games shy of my my homecoming game in my senior year of football, I destroyed my shoulder and I was a quarterback. But because we were such a small school, we played both sides of the ball. So on defense, I broke up the throwing arm and very quickly learned that regardless of your grades, an academic scholarship can go away if you no longer can do the football stuff. So probably a relatively typical tale, went into the workforce to take a year off, try to get insurance, try to get the ability to get the shoulder fixed, and then maybe try to walk on and play football. During that time, I got a surgery, got very, very heavily addicted to opiate pain medication. That's kind of where my tale turned south from the age of about 20 to just shy of 30. It was about a decade, Meridith, that, and addiction ran rampant in my family. So I was no stranger to partying and, doing keg stands and lines of cocaine at the high school parties. And I was just the guy that always did everything to the extreme. So in sales, I was a very high performer, was naturally talented. But when the drugs got introduced, it numbed a lot of emotional pain, numbed a heck of a lot of physical pain. And I was a pretty beat up guy at 20 something years old. So it provided me with the relief that I think a lot of people search for to escape emotional pain, to escape physical pain. It just was homeostasis for me. It was euphoria. I could get rid of the pain. I could sell. I could talk. I could have fun. And really, it doused a flame that existed inside me that pretty much everybody in my community and my family told me was wrong. You shouldn't want to be the president. You shouldn't want to be an astronaut. You shouldn't want to own businesses. Like, that's crazy. That's too grandiose. People from our town don't get there. So long story short, you had a guy that was experiencing pain, found a way to numb the pain, and just kind of disappeared into the dark recesses of his own mind for about 10 years on the sales floor, performing very well, but to no end, making 150 grand a year, spending it all on drugs and partying, and really making no development. And at the age of 29, I kind of had enough of it. Things had kind of come to a head, and there was a lot of, I kind of liken it to that scene where Harrison Ford's, swinging and running from the big tumbling ball. I think it's Raiders of the Lost Ark or something like that.
Yeah.
That's how life felt for me at that point.
Yeah.
I was met with a crossroads. And at that juncture, I said, you know what? I'm going to rob a bank. So I robbed a local bank. It wasn't really, the smash and grab, guns ablazing tale that most people would like to hear. It was more of a, I was too probably narcissistic and proud to commit suicide, even though that's probably where my head was at. But I didn't have that in me. And I needed some sort of intervention that wasn't occurring. So I decided to take control of, from myself, which was by committing the crime. I was either going to get away with a bunch of money and go to rehab and relocate and try to start a new life elsewhere, or there would be some intervention for us. So in 2014, and I believe it was April or February, somewhere around there, I robbed a bank and went to prison.
So you robbed a bank and you got caught.
Yes. And I didn't get caught till 5 days later after they started. It's funny, Meridith, they aired the closed circuit TV footage on the local news, and they never would do that. They show a quick picture here or there. If you've seen this man, let us know type of thing. They had no idea. It was 5-6 days that I was what they call on the run. Police had no idea. They were doing interviews. They had no idea. I was there, license plate on the car. If they knew who I was very easy to track down.
Yeah.
But it took about 5 or 6 days until eventually the lady that we were renting a house from kind of put 2 and 2 together and realized she got a lot of back rent very quickly. And there was a couple new items in the house and the demeanor had changed. And I was a 6'4" athletic man with a gray sweatsuit. And all of a sudden, her husband was a former cop.
The light bulb went off.
Yeah, exactly. So
had
that not happened, I probably would have got away with it. But, thank my lucky stars that it did go down that way, because I wouldn't have it any other way at this point.
So let me ask you this. So did you feel that way in the moment? Was it almost like when the shock of getting caught and everything, because I love what you said, and I really want the audience to pick up on that, because it's kind of my whole passion around uncertainty. I feel like we are living in a society right now where we're being taught that either life should be easy, and when it isn't our fault. And sometimes the intervention shows up, and it's an intervention that you needed, like you were spiraling downhill and it was an intervention you needed. But sometimes life just throws you an intervention. You get fired from a job. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. We just went through Hurricane Helene. This wasn't what we signed up for.
Right.
But if you can view it correctly or as opportunity, you can find the opportunity in it. So how long till you made that click in your head?
Well, so, it was unconscious / subconscious at first. And just to augment what you said, Meridith, it's funny. You and I have a lot more in common than I think we know. That's a sentiment that I echo and I agree with 100%, which is, uncertainty and, the throwing of curveballs, all these things. I think the average human considers that a major issue, right? Like everything was good. We were chugging along just fine. And then, we got thrown this curveball. I think those curveballs are inevitability is the word I'm looking for there.
Yes.
They're an inevitability. So, my grandfather said something to me, one of the very few things I remember him saying, and he died when I was very young, but he said, boy, just go into each day knowing something, and he used the word effed up. Something effed up's probably going to happen, and you'll never go to bed disappointed. And it was, that's paraphrasing kind of what he said. He was more referring to people, like, just plan on somebody ticking you off, plan on something going wrong. And it's a very pessimistic attitude at surface level. But if you really delve into it, it's the truth, right? Adversity is coming. There's
Yes.
impending adversity coming. You're never going to put yourself in a position. I was at a party this past Sunday and Saturday in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, with a billionaire by the name of Yadek Tadla. He had a New York Times bestseller party, and there was a lot of affluent people there. And the one connection that I'm always, I'm in sales, right? I'm a people person, so I'm always looking to draw connections. Where can I show, a likeness between myself and this person who's at a much higher level that I'd like to get to? And the one thing that I drew universal amongst all these affluent people is they had all overcome significant adversity.
Yeah.
They had something come into their life that just kicked them in the knees and brought them down to the floor, and they made a choice. His book is about, getting suicidal, then coming back from it with some intervention from a loved one. But the reality is everybody who goes on to do magnificent things has overcome adversity at some point. So really, your voice of uncertainty here, and your message of thriving in uncertainty, you need to welcome uncertainty. Like,
yes.
If that doesn't come into your ecosystem, then you have no chance for improvement. Making these marked incremental improvements along the rungs of the ladder of life, that is basic. It's incredibly basic, and it's the average Joe's way of doing things. And it's no disrespect to anybody who chooses to live that way. But I venture to think that people who are watching this live stream are looking for a little more. And if you're looking to do more than the average bear, so to speak, then uncertainty and change and adversarial, situations, these are things that you should welcome because you thrive from them. And there's no such thing as failure if you don't give up, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I just said this to my son. He, 7-year-old kid, he comes from, Dad, they were making fun of my picture of a bald eagle. And, geez, it really hurt my feelings and this, that, and the third. He's the sweetest kid in the world, right? And I said, Max, you should be thankful for that moment. And he goes, why? They were so mean. I said, because, buddy, did it hurt you? No. Did you die from it? No. Did you lose any friends over it? No. Let me ask you a question. How did you deal with it? He goes, I just looked back at them, and this is coming from a 7-year-old. He said, you know what? Sounds like you have a good reason to feel that way. He goes, did it make you feel better? No, he had heard me say this. He goes, Dad, I told him, I said, did that make you feel better? And they said, yeah. He goes, well, I'm glad I could do that for you. I'm going to go back to drawing my bald eagle now. This is coming from the mouth of a 7-year-old. But I said, Max, now you can get through that situation, no problem. So the next time somebody makes fun of you or bullies you or whatever, that just some keen words can talk you through that scenario. You are now better because of it. There's another badge on your sash, right?
Yeah.
So regarding the uncertainty and where where its inflection was in my life, every time I've had uncertainty, I've gotten better on the backside of it. And that bank robbery and the realization I came to after that, I'd love to tell you, and Meridith, that's one thing I pride myself in. I don't try to create glitz and glamour. I'd love to tell you that in that moment, I had this epiphany and the light shone through the clouds. No, I just said, okay, I robbed a bank. Here I am. That was a dumb decision. Where the real progress came was coming out of prison and going, okay, I have a clean slate now. And that was the first time that I had taken it upon myself to force significant change in my life, where I had been, I like to use the term raised by wolves, meaning that the people that were in my life were not good people. So, and this is where I say, if you'd watch the tale of my life, you'd kind of understand the way it went. All the influences that I had were negative. If the frame on the car is rotted, weld it together, spray some black spray paint over it, sell the car anyways. If they're the fool enough to buy it, then they deserve to get, taken. And these were just the people that influenced my life. So the paradigm shift for me was taking ownership and saying, I am not going to say that I'm the victim of this leadership. I'm not going to say I'm the victim of bad mentorship. I'm not going to say I'm the victim of being a son of an addict family. I'm going to be me. And I have a series of things that I believe are right and wrong. I'm now going to take this part of my life to execute upon those. A few years from now, if I crash and burn, I'll go back to the old ways, but I have to try something different. So that's really what it was for me, was choosing to live my own life at that point.
So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this. What is it about a person? And is it something that's inherent, that we're born with? Is it something that we learn? Like, you take two people who would have been in a situation that you were in, and you could easily take the path of, it isn't fair in a situation that you're in. It isn't fair that why weren't you born into an affluent family that could have paid for you to go to college? Why weren't there programs that if you got hurt, you would still get your college? I mean, we can make excuses all day long. And some people drown in those excuses, and some people rise above those ashes. And that's like you're talking about that party that you were at. I mean, I think the most amazing thing that I've learned is success is not logical. Success does not belong to the smartest person, the most connected person, the most talented, the one with the most money and the most resources. It belongs to the person with the right mindset completely. So what is that? It isn't like you had coaches and trainers and, listening to
Sure.
gurus. Like, why did you get out when I venture to say some of your friends didn't?
So I'm happy to answer that question. I just want to briefly, if I may, touch on one thing that you just
Yeah.
said, that I agree and disagree with fundamentally. And I
Mhm.
disagree in a way that I think you'll understand.
Yeah.
I disagree that success is not logical, that
Mhm.
statement. I agree with the fact that it's not logical in that you can
Yeah.
align it with things you would normally align success with, like college degree, success, affluent family, success. I have discovered that success is supremely commonsensical and logical in this way.
Yeah.
If you work harder
Yeah.
than anybody else around you, you will have success. If you have the courage to do things that you've never done before, you will experience success. If you're willing to listen to mentorship and actually learn from the mistakes of other people instead of going, well, that worked for them, it's not going to work for me. Like, common sense and logic govern all in this life. And that has been the major lesson for me. So when I say that I believe success is logical, I agree with you that it's not logical to the end that society would like us to believe, that there are these conventions that you must follow to ensure your success. There is no way to ensure a particular level of success. There is a way to ensure that you have more success, significantly more success than you have now. And that is by simply doing. You cannot put in 10 times more effort than your peer and not have greater success. It's not possible. So I believe success is logical in that way. So I just wanted to say that, not out of a point of disagreement, just because I believe it gives some people hope.
Absolutely.
They hear that success isn't logical and they say, well, geez, man, then how do I figure it out? You're exactly right. It ain't what you were taught.
You're right.
That's fundamentally important. It's not what society or your teachers or academia told you it was. And I think we're learning that more and more every day. Not to crap on academia, but to learn from somebody who learned from the same book you're learning from and is just dictating it and delineating it and interpreting it to you may not be the most cohesive path to success. Maybe finding someone who can teach you from experiential learning, who's actually put the iron in the fire, that might be the best route to go. That's just my personal opinion. But back to, I got so passionate about that answer. What was the original question?
The original question was, and this kind of goes with the whole logical piece, and really what I mean by the fact that success isn't logical. And you've got to know this. I mean, you're in the training space. You walk into a room full of people. And if you had to choose on the first day who was going to be the rock star sales performer, chances are you would be wrong if you were only looking at the current data there.
Yes.
Once people are exposed to information, I am interested. The original question was, if I had to line up you and the 3 other buddies you were living with that paid your back rent really fast and spent money, I would venture to guess that you elevated and maybe another one didn't get as far as you did or didn't take the path. If I go back to your graduating class of 87, if I look at mine from Uniontown, Pennsylvania, there are people that are still the same, like never elevated out of the mess we were in way back when I was in high school. What is that difference? If we're all exposed to the same information, why did you decide to make a change and other people don't?
I think so to say that anybody can reach the same levels of success, that's where you're absolutely correct in that. That's illogical. There's no logical certainty to that. Here's what I believe it is. And I'll give you an example. When I go into a room of sales trainees, okay, and I'll go to each one of them and I'll sit them all side by side, okay, like in a row. And I'll look at them and say, okay, scream at me as loud as you can. Oh, what? Scream at me as loud as you can. Say the F word right in my face. If I'm in a group with it, it'll welcome.
Right.
Say a swear word. Call me fat. Call me stupid. Just yell right in my face. I promise it's going to help you. Some people are like, you're fat. Like they're very hesitant. Other people are like, you're fat. Like they try. The people who are willing to try, when somebody says to them, do this uncomfortable thing, it's uncomfortable, but I am a position of authority. You'd like to be where I am. Yeah, yes, I would. Then try this thing. Trust me. And that goes to the whole experiential learning thing. You know, there's a saying that if we took the money in the world and we redistribute it to everybody equally,
Yeah.
it would all end up in the same hands. And that is abundantly true. There's not a truer statement made than that. And I'll explain to you why. Because it has nothing to do with rich families or bloodlines or dynasties. It has to do with some people are genetically wired to have courage. And the
Yeah.
people that have courage and believe that they deserve a piece of the pie are the people that will go get a piece of the pie. And I can tell you that from personal experience. Meridith, I came from a home where my dad told me, and I love my father to death for who he is, but he was not the best facilitator of growth of Luke Lunkenheimer because I was a fundamentally different human being. I burned a completely different way. He told me, get into upper to middle management. You know, if the crap hits the fan, it doesn't hit you. If the company gets sued, you don't get sued. If the assets are lost, you don't lose
Be
them.
safe.
Be safe. Now, don't be afraid to climb amongst the rank and file. But once you get to the top of the rank and file, don't enter into the upper caste, because if you enter into the upper caste, now all of a sudden you've got responsibilities and the weight of the world is on your shoulders. And I'm like, dude, I want the weight of the world on my shoulders because that's the only way I can have a private jet. And I really want a private jet. You don't need you don't want that. That's only for the rich people, blah, blah, blah. So I was given a very minimalist, very scarcity mindset that I was born into and I was raised in. So when I went out into the marketplace, I had people from a very young age, and I don't mean braggadocio here. I don't mean to be arrogant, but my mentors and my bosses were like, dude, you're the best we've ever seen. Like, you got this natural gift, man. Like, holy crap. Like, you could be an owner. You could be a dealer. You freaking franchise partner. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to be the number one salesman. I just want my company car. I might go into management, and I was just so sure that that's what it was. And what it took was for me to be forced into an environment, and that environment was prison, where I was at risk of death frequently. And things became very, very valuable to me that I never valued before. And I started to learn that it didn't matter what I was taught. It didn't matter what daddy said. It didn't matter what the mold or the structure was that I grew up in. If I didn't adapt right now, I was going to lose my life. And that was it. So I was forced under adaptation. And when the adaptation happened and I was thrust into this environment where I must be an alpha, I must fight with my hands, I must, pee on my corner of the yard, so to speak. I'm being metaphorical here, and assert myself instead of just flying under the radar. It became evident that I flourished in that environment and that I was a leader and that I was able to do things that nobody else could do. And I was able to receive benefits that I'd never had before, and respect and clout. And, we're talking about a very controlled, very archaic, very negative environment. But when you've been amongst that and you realize that you're the cream that rises to the top, and it's not because of size, it's not because of money, all the normal social conventions go out the window when you're in prison. Okay, it's all about your ability to think and your ability to fight. And if you can think right, you don't need to fight. So luckily the physical altercations for me were there, but they were minimal, and I was able to position myself with words in a way where I was an authority figure, both with the corrections officers and with the inmates. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And again, I'm not saying this to try to sound arrogant.
No, not at all.
It was just a learning experience for me. So then now I'm outside the jail walls, and I'm like, the prison walls. And I'm like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this thing I learned. And I don't mean knocking a guy out and taking his brownie for lunch. I mean, let me try to assert myself and gain authority in this ecosystem. Oh, look, I did it. Okay. So I made management in a week. All right. Now let me see if I can position myself right side by side with the owner and show him that I can do the same thing he can do. A week later, hey, would you consider taking over one of our failing stores? And you're a month outside of prison. You're just coming off of a B felony with a guy who barely was willing to hire you because you were a felon, and now he's telling you he's going to give you one of his locations. This is when I very first got out of prison. So, very long drawn out answer to your question. I apologize for being so.
No, it's great.
But it just, for me, it was understanding that I am the only one who dictates my environment and what I can do. So for me, uncertainty was an opportunity. Everything was taken out from underneath me, and I had to figure it out on my own. And having the courage to experiment is what got me there. So back to your original question, what is the great differentiator between the people who end up climbing the ladder and those who stay at the rung that they're at? I would say I can't tell you definitively, but I can tell you for me, it had a lot to do with courage and the willingness to do something I had never done before. And I think that the majority of people in the entrepreneurial space who end up experiencing success, or even in life, even mothers, even working people that end up getting what they want, it's because they had the courage to say, if I want something I've never had, I have to be willing to do something I've never done before.
Yeah,
The
so
people
true.
that can take that leap, I think, are the people that have the highest chance at major success.
So, unfortunately, we are burning time. You've got to come. You've got to come back on. I have so many more questions to ask you. So, there you get out of prison and you're selling like crazy. What made you create your own business, create your own selling system? Really, I mean, obviously, I love this whole path that you basically hit a wall. You fall even lower, but you find the opportunity in that, and really figuring out that in essence you can influence and you can persuade, and in doing that you create a following and you can achieve success. But at some point you got your dad's message out of your head,
Yep.
and you thought, I want more, I'm going to strike out on my own, and you create the sales training, the methodology, the programs that you do now.
So I'll take 10 years and pack it into 2 minutes, best I can. There's a myriad of things that transpired that got me to where I am. So I don't want anybody to think it was simple. But if I'm going to put a bow on it, it was tenacious effort in front of an employer who said, you're better than 9 to 5, bro. Like, you need to be an entrepreneur, and said, would you consider partnering in business in the trade that you know, which at that time was car sales. So he invested a significant amount of money for me to start a car dealership. He brought this to me. I did not seek this capital. He came to me and said, you're a smart car guy. I've always wanted to do a car thing. I'll front you 150 grand. We'll split it 50-50, 4 years. You can buy me out if you do a good thing. That was a tremendous opportunity. Okay. Most people say, well, yeah, I could freaking be rich and famous if someone invests 150 grand in me to open a business. And I would say to them, that guy would have never fronted you 150 grand unless you did what I did, which was work 70 hours a week, ruthlessly, close at an 87% closing ratio, and make him $1 million in 6 months. You go do that and he'll consider giving you $150, right? From there, it was starting the dealerships. Eventually, I learned that my strength was not in turning inventory, marketing vehicles. It was in closing deals. I just had the ability to shut everybody down that had a pulse and a paycheck. And then I was able, the most important thing was, there's many, many good salespeople out there, but there are very few good educators. Everybody just wants to teach you the way they did it. I said this thing anytime they said they need to talk to their wife. Now you say this thing. Whenever they said they want to think about it, I said this word track. Just when you get caught up, you say this word track. They engage in talk training. What I learned was that I was an incredible sales educator. I helped people understand human communication. I helped them be more confident and understand more about themselves. I helped them understand more about other people and the discourse that happens, and why, and cortisol, and dopamine, and hormones, and security, and personal, human condition. There's so much to it. But the 10,000 foot flyover view was, I discovered through a series of entrepreneurial ventures that I was a very strong sales trainer, and I believed that I could bring more value to the marketplace than the current educators in that ecosystem. So I had some money put aside from the car dealerships, and I thrust myself into that world. And we're talking about less than 12 months, and I'm iterating with the biggest names in sales training, the Bradleys, I won't name names. I shouldn't have done that. I'll keep to my own.
No, that's great. I think that's powerful. So literally, your program, Pay to Persuade, is that correct?
Yes, Pay to Persuade. Yep. P2P.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I got it right.
Appreciate
and we'll put all that in the show notes. But it's basically your methodology and your style. You took what you did naturally and put it into a process.
Yes. So our strength, so there's a few things. We have something called the 3 C's, and that is just our primary structure. That's what differentiates us from everybody else. And it's content, confidence, and cadence, meaning this: as a salesperson, if you are not adhering to a framework in your sales conversation, for instance, you do real estate, if you're not handling each customer the exact same way, and people will say, well, every customer is different, they need to be handled differently. Yes, they need to be different conversations, different products, different features, but the framework needs to remain the same. Otherwise, the outcome is not measurable. You
Yeah.
can't tell if you're getting better or worse unless you're adhering to a framework. Furthermore, you can't tell where you screwed up. We have a 3-step framework. It is the most simple in the entire sales training marketplace. Nobody can touch it. I'm not trying to sound like Donald Trump here.
Sure.
Nobody can touch us. We have the best training, but it is absolutely infallible. Why? Because it solves for the human condition. People come into the marketplace looking for a product. They want to be listened to. They want to feel like what they're saying to you is valuable. They don't want to feel like you're just data gathering to try to sell them something. They want to feel like you truly care about the outcome for them. So we have something called the Big Three. It's the framework that we stick to. It works in every industry. And we optimize for something very different than any other sales training company. Other sales training companies want to come in and they want to teach you what is called talk training. Customer says this, you say that. You get on a phone, you want to get them to call you back, say this word track. They tell you they want to talk to your wife, use this word track. It's all scripted phrases and things to say. And if it's a framework, it's based in questioning. And the problem with questions is you're not going to always get the same answer. So you have to be able to think on the fly. So we optimize for what we call authentic selling and compassionate interrogation to a non-objectionable close. And what we optimize for is the salesperson's confidence, because there are statistic after statistic that prove the fact that you can give somebody a library of scripted rebuttals, but if they cannot portray them confidently, they're not going to be effective. Confidence is the ultimate equalizer. So we create a confident salesperson who can sell across any industry, in any discipline, in any vertical, because they understand human beings and they know how to qualify at the outset of a conversation to do one of 3 things. Either A, if it's a non-buyer today, they optimize for compassionate interrogation and follow-up, meaning if there's no chance this person's gonna buy today, there's no chance of conversion. People say, well, there's no way to know that for sure. There absolutely is. There absolutely is. And if you know human beings, you know how to spot it. And that's what we teach. So if there's no deal there, immediately optimize for follow-up, immediately optimize for relationship and going along the path the customer is most cohesive with, because that's your highest chance at closing that deal down the road. That's step 1. Step 2, if it's an easy deal, because with our system, it's very easy to tell right front and center at the outset of the conversation whether this is going to be an easy deal or not. And if it is, you move to strike with tenacity, because number 1, you optimize profit that way. There's less discounting, you retain more gross profit, and the customer is happy to do it that way because you facilitated a very, very efficient process for them. And the quicker you get it done, the quicker you can move on to the next one. And then your statistics grow because you're packing more, more and more sales into a time period. And then the middle one is you got somebody that's kind of a difficult sale. You're not really sure how to navigate it. You're going to have objections. We teach a framework where you can solve for every objectionable component at the outset of the conversation and lead to a non-objectionable close using something that we call time gates. So it's a very, diverse training. There's a lot to it, but it's also fundamentally very simple. So it's incredibly easy to learn. And the one thing that you get when you walk away from this sales training is relentless confidence. When you're done with our sales training program, you walk out the other side, you can sell anything to anybody, anywhere, and you're sure of it. So thank you for giving me a moment to explain that.
No, that's great. So how do people find out about you? How do they find out about Paid to Persuade and your programs and your energy just around the whole topic of sales?
I appreciate that. I love selling. I love selling because we do it the right way. It's one thing to be a salesperson and be the typical schmoozer and BSer and just kind of ride the wave. It's another to fundamentally change the process and help people and still make a ton of money doing it. And you find the most effective, most profitable salespeople are the ones who are actually doing it the right way.
Being female, I tell women all the time, it is the greatest job you will ever have. You have the unbelievable flexibility. So when life's demands come on you, and then you have an unbelievable to make amount of money where, I'm old enough that I came up in a world where being a female was a negative. I realize it's not that way anymore, but it was like you said, it was the great equalizer. If I could sell, nobody cared if I was little and green and walked backwards. If I could produce, everybody wanted me. And so it was a time in my life where I made unbelievable money. And it was a job where I could crack any ceiling I wanted to crack because I could produce.
It's the one industry where you truly have no ceiling to your income and you have control over your life, right?
Yeah.
You just said it. As a woman in sales, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, you had one hell of a mountain to climb. And I respect you for what you've been able to do because your job was much more difficult than mine. And I'm aware of that. But it's funny, you go to the most chauvinistic, most sexist guy in the world. If you can do 1.5 over his 1.2 best gunner corner man, you got the leather chair in the corner office. That is the great
all
equalizer.
day long. I worked for a guy who wouldn't hire a woman to save his life. I got pushed on him.
Yep.
And he hated me until I started to produce. He was giving me a chair at his right arm. I mean, everything changed.
Money changes everything.
Yeah.
And to your question, paidtopersuade.com. So the word paid, the number 2, the word persuade.com just goes to a page where they can learn a little bit about me, see a few podcast appearances. We are very strong with business to business. So if there's business owners out there that have a sales team and you just want big numbers, ruthless closers, self-sufficient guys who keep themselves accountable, that's what we're known for. And if it's B2C, if you're just a salesperson, I say if you're a salesperson, when I say I just mean one individual, and you're in sales, you're in real estate, you're in insurance, you're in solar, door to door, you're in cars, it doesn't matter. You're selling a product, you're selling a process, a service. It does not matter. The framework remains the same. I strongly encourage you to look into us. We are the only sales training in the marketplace that guarantees results. Meaning, if we do not, we will put you under contract. And if in business, we don't get you a minimum 10% overall increase in your sales revenue, you don't pay. You get all your money back. And in B2C, if you're a salesperson and we don't increase your annual income, commissionable income by a minimum of 20%, so if you're making $100,000 a year, if we don't get you to 120, 125, you get all your money back. And it's a fraction of that to engage with us. The biggest differentiator, Meridith, is our continual coaching. We are the only sales training discipline where we bestow our sales training upon you, and then we stay with you every week for a minimum of an hour. That's our cadence, our third C: content, confidence, and cadence. So paidtopersuade.com. And I strongly suggest, not looking for a cheap follow here, but I'm telling you guys, I give free content every single day on our YouTube channel, Paid to Persuade, paid the number 2 persuade. But more importantly, on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Meta, all the big ones, Luke Lunk. My first name, Luke, the first 4 letters of my last name, Lunk, at Luke Lunk. Every single day, we fire out real, actionable information that you can use to get better in your sales career.
Well, I'm going to go. I'm going to go follow you. I've just been really just intrigued and just love this conversation. I hope that you'll agree to come back on, because I want to ask a million other questions as we head into 2025.
I'm happy to come back anytime, Meridith. It's been fun.
Awesome. We will see you in 2025. And remember, all of this uncertainty, if you understand the methodology, if you use our proven formula, you are going to turn every level of adversity into your greatest competitive advantage.